Welcome again, folks. I'm Bill Carell, and we are lighting the candle, A World That Works. This panel has had the best time ever, talking about dozens of different types of topics, many of which we find are very engaging for us, and some of them are difficult. We actually talk about things that are not easy to talk about. And the main reason we do this is because we are working through a process that will deliver empowerment on the other side. To you, to us, the reason that we're talking is because we think talking makes a difference. That said, we'll go around and introduce ourselves again, starting with Vanessa.
All right. Hi, everyone. So Vanessa S. Lewis. I'm a marketing copywriter and a freelance writer. Freelance writing is really something I have been taking on more so this past year. It goes along with being a very curious person. And so I'm drawn to this podcast each week because you never really know what we're going to talk about. But we're joined by an excellent panel of wonderful, open-minded people who just come together to try to answer a question that's posed by our moderator, Bill. And very often we end up coming up with some more questions by the end of each segment. And so it's kind of fun, and maybe our listeners and watchers can follow along and, see which questions they come up with themselves. And whether or not they get answered on this podcast, we certainly don't have all the answers. And I don't mean to talk for everyone else on here on the panel, but that's what I love about it. So, and I'm always game to see if we can discover a little truth along the way. So, Bill, what's the question for today? Or are we following up with what we just talked about this last segment?
Yeah. Would you like me to see if I can paraphrase what my recollection of what that was 5 minutes ago?
Yes, I love your paraphrase. Please do.
So this is kind of a two-step deal. The first one is, let's pretend for a moment there are these two monoliths that are out there doing battle with each other, and they're fighting for control of our attention with their narratives. And they are doing this any possible way that they can to slice and dice any emotional response or attachment that we would have to that. And so, as a very famous person says, it's actually being locked into a war between two ideas, this one or this one. And it actually goes far beyond a reasoning or a logical conversation. It gets into ideology and almost a dogmatic religion, for many people, because they are so for something and so against something else, which has its closest resemblance is possibly to something that's religious. So all of that said, I'm posing a question of what does it take for a new conversation to kind of rise out of that conversation, one that actually does make the world a better place, one where human beings can be more expressive of who they are and less of an expression of what they think and what they've been taught to think, or what they've been, fooled into thinking that their thinking is good thinking. You know what I'm saying? So with that in mind, shall we move on to our friend Tina?
Well, I'm Tina Kadish with Life is Ideal. I'm a career change agent, and so I help transform your career to get purpose in your life. Okay, so the question is, and I love this podcast because it is stimulating healthy conversations and just opens your mind that there's healthy conversations. So I love it.
To that end, the questions are more like nailing Jell-O to the wall than they are black and white.
Right.
I hope that's where we're taking this always. Is out to the skinny branches of what's possible.
Right. What's possible? There's a lot of gray areas. Okay. There isn't just black and white. So anytime you're talking to people, there's a lot of gray. Okay. And I think too, when you're talking to people, it's understanding them. It's listening to understand, not just talking, because too many times we're reacting, but we're really not listening to the other person. So I find that happening a lot, that people are just pushing the conversation to their narrative, okay? And they're not interested at all in what you have to say, what your opinion is, which is what I believe is happening right now in this climate.
Very good. Ken?
Vanessa, your comments today keep triggering various things from various wisdom traditions that have been shared with me. So one of the Zen, yeah, no, it's awesome. It's funny. It's one of the Zen things that was shared with me was just keep asking bigger and better questions until the questions fall away and the answer reveals itself. Then get back to asking questions.
I like that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you practice it, because what happens is you'll reach a choice point where you begin to think you have an answer, and then you'll want to take ownership over it. And if you discipline yourself to recognize that, and then ask yourself the question, is there another question? A lot of times you break through these kind of identity set points, and you're able to go deeper. And having been in the training, it's exhausting. Like you need a nap just because of the mental strain, but it's very interesting. So it just triggered that for me.
Good. Anything else, Ken?
Nope.
Lisa?
Because I was thinking the same thing. Well, Tina, I was thinking, gray is kind of where we want to be, I think, instead of, because it feels like it's just black and white.
Yep.
So the gray area would be a great place to be. And like Ken was saying, I was thinking the same, I practice, I like to see the Christ in everyone, but it's something that is a constant practice, because I think it's not always easy to do. So I know what's going on today is making me practice that even harder, and to ask the deeper questions, like to think about if there's an issue that somebody's really passionate about, what's the underlying thing that you want for yourself? What's dig. What is it that you personally want for yourself? And then, maybe you can come to terms with, how do we go about it? How do you see it? How do I see it? Is there a compromise kind of thing? And I'll be first to admit that I don't always have these difficult conversations with people, although I could have them easily, because there's people all around you. At least today, there's not as many people around, because there can't be. But the other thing was I've done Circles of Trust by Parker Palmer, where, and like Ken was saying, it's hard to get into these deep conversations, especially when you're just doing listening to listen and not to fix, save, or advise someone. And it's a powerful thing to do, and it's a very hard thing to do. And that's why there always has to be a moderator who can draw you back again, because people are always wanting to fix, save, or advise each other. So I think that's where the conversations have to go, where you don't do that anymore, where you just keep, like Ken would say, or everybody was saying, ask better questions.
That's awesome. When Ken was talking about rigorous training, I did a lot of that back in the 1990s, and literally being locked in a room for weekends, and having things be so confronting with regard to my mind not being able to wrap around the concept that what I was hearing in language meant so much to me personally in terms of my experience, and also finding out that it had everything about who I be, that the whole conversation of ontology and the study of being for human beings, and the possibility for being for all human beings, that whatever we're coming up against just keeps pointing back to that Buddhist philosophy that the greatest struggle a human ever has is the one with their small s self. That's the thing that just keeps reminding them to be afraid, to reserve, to not take chances, to be right, all of those sorts of things that are survival in nature. And when we get to a point where everything we hear and everything we see says that you really are in a survival mode here, and not only are you in a survival mode, the only way to get out of it is to choose one of us leaders, and we'll get you out of it. But you also have to give us up your liberty, your thinking, your desires, your wants, and you have to give that over for the greater good of whatever it is we're telling you is the greater good this week.
Right.
So with that in mind, when we look at this, even in a small group of people, it's so powerful to realize that a conversation is confronting with good reason. It is confronting to different people at different times. And the reason for that is they are different human beings with different experiences, understandings, all the rest of that stuff. And at the end of a conversation, if something new can come out of it, in a group of people that are disparate in terms of their backgrounds, their beliefs. There are people that I know that are not religious in the slightest, and they actually are very much affronted if somebody talks to them about the concept of a supreme being, and that the notion of that just being very superstitious, and of course you have to have somebody else that you can blame for your accidents, and give credit for when things work, and and leave it all up to them. And what's really very difficult for me, and that I'm constantly working at doing, is to have conversations with people where I actually do hear the best language that they have on the subject today. It might not be a so-called right answer. It might not be fully developed. And it might not be anything other than, it seems to me, that never gets said. We usually just say what we think the facts are. But in most cases, we're talking about seemings. We don't have a place where we can go and check in and see if anything's true or right. We have to have this on the inside of us. So the question now is, what sort of an event? There were people that I have talked to over the last 6 months that thought, on the other side of COVID, we have to be better to each other. If we learned nothing else about this at all, using this dreaded pandemic to beat each other up. And to control what people are doing, saying, and being, that's not okay. And at some point, we have to get bigger and better than that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do know there are sufficient numbers of people that are upset with the status quo, but they're not upset with what's going on. They're upset with something. Either the system, as we were talking about before, or someone else or themselves. I think the three realms of there's something wrong around here is what's wrong with me, what's wrong with you, what's wrong with it, And to stay alive, we have to be looking for what's wrong to make sure that it doesn't blindside us. With all of that said, are we at a place where it makes an awful lot of sense to completely disengage as a people from all of, for instance, the accurate polling that we got this time that basically said there was as much as a 17-point difference, in the presidential race. It's like, guys, people make a lot of money off of trying to convince us of one thing or another, and they at this point don't even care if it bears any resemblance to what actually happens. So how do we get bigger than that, I guess, is the question I'm asking. Or am I even in the right ballpark in terms of what the conversational dilemma is, or the storm that we're talking about?
I'll pipe it, because I kind of, to settle in, or to, that everything will work out or everything will be okay. But I also have never been, I'm sure most of us are feeling this way, as affected by an election as this one. And I've never been sort of an activist of any kind. And I also believe in being called to do something. So I decided before this election that no matter what happens, no matter who wins, I am going to find, or some outside force is going to help me discover what mine is to do next, and that I would get involved in something that as I said, like I deep dive into my own, what I want from a certain issue or happening in my world, that I'm going to, become part of something that is working to make a difference to what I want to see in the world.
That's completely awesome. And not even knowing what it's going to be, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there's a commitment inside of you that basically says, no matter who it is, my life's not going to be over, or I'm not going to be at odds with everybody else who thinks their life is over as a result of it being this guy or this guy.
Right, right.
This is like where we reclaim our power, where we reclaim our birthright, and our ability to have some say-so about how our life goes, and that, in fact, it works. It's a great, I love what you just said, Lisa. Absolutely, 150%. Who else?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, Lisa. I haven't been an activist either, in my life. But however, when a situation comes up, like right now for me, with my daughter passing away, I see the injustice with the medical profession. And I'm on a mission to get justice. Okay. So that's personal for me. So now I feel like I'm becoming an activist at some point. Okay. Because that's personal to me. So everybody during this pandemic, there's something, or not pandemic only, it's this whole election. There are issues that are really close to them that is really bothering them, because it must hit home. Because I know people that just the abortion conversation really hits home for this person. So that's why they're acting the way they are. So I'm trying to understand, where are they coming from on why they're feeling that way, and how it's personal for them to, communicate in a way that may come across angry. They're pissed off. They're really scared of who becomes the next president. For me, either one, we got to accept it. We got to move on. We can't stay in that anger and that stuck, what can we do to control our own life and our own immediate family, our own niche, in our own community? We can't control everything. We have to reclaim something.
Well, I think Ken would agree that that control is only an illusion. It's part of the reaction to the fear and the upset and all the rest of those things that allows you to have the audacity to get out of bed every morning.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so it really, it's an interesting time, and it really makes a lot of people talk and communicate. There's a lot of conversations going on, more than I've ever seen before, good or bad. There's definitely that going on. So it's been interesting, and we'll see. It keeps you on your toes, because we don't know how this is going to turn out.
So a very interesting human being, I heard a quote. He said, not since 1860s has there been this kind of polarization in our country.
Yes, I heard that.
Down to family members not tolerating each other's point of view and disowning each other on social media, so that they could be more identifiable with their tribe, And we're not at the point large scale yet where, guns and rocks and all that sort of thing. However, if you stop and think about what's really going on here with these two narratives and the conversations, if the system were against us doing that at all, that all would have stopped. What if everything is fair game, everything is at play here, and there, whenever you get just a little bit more room by taking an action, and nobody is there to confront you or stop it or nip it in the bud, what happens? Oh boy, I didn't expect that. Let's try this now, And then before you know it, the so-called decent people that are in the middle, that are quiet, that's one more location in the universe of something to be fearful about. I don't know. I mean, watching people, march into the suburbs in New York and Chicago and Seattle and Portland, that was intentionally done, to unnerve people. And quite frankly, it's an effective tactic. It's all part of the game. When you look, if you read rules, what's Rules for Radicals and The Power of Anarchy, in order to break something down to the point where a new leadership can come forward and claim the power. However, if you're really for people, there's no power going on here. They're talking about, this is all about fighting for power. No, it's force. This has nothing to do with power, because power comes from, it's an internally generated agreement. Force is causing people to behave in such a way that they have no choice in the matter, or they have to, it may be a live and die situation. I'm giving you that distinction. You may not agree with it, but I'm saying when you see situations where people are acting in a particular way and taking away the rights of people or treating them badly, it's force. It's not power.
I agree with you, Bill. I think that we have a lot of forced power put on us, and I think that there's the control, and I do not like that. To control, we need to be able to make our own decisions. I do not believe in government control. Okay, I don't believe in communism. I mean, that's very simple. I believe that we're all individuals and need to make our own decisions. And I don't like the censorship that's going on. So, forced power, I like that.
Yeah. So
in martial arts. Oh, sorry, Bill.
I was just going to say thank you for allowing me to narrate there for a minute. But the whole idea here is I want to hear what you have to say about martial arts, Ken.
Oh, just as simple. In martial arts, we define power as a lack of resistance. So basically, it's, and the other thing that struck me was you're talking about, do you step away, do you back off of Facebook, that kind of thing. And it's, all I could think of was, like, as an athlete, there are times when you're putting forth a lot of effort, you're stressing your system for growth, but then you've got to know when to be in recovery, so that, because otherwise you just wear yourself out. So it'd be interesting for people to start to recognize their own sense of spiritual growth versus spiritual fatigue from not allowing themselves spiritual recovery, or mentally, whatever it is. If you're plugged in all the time, you're going to wear yourself out. So then, it's time to unplug. And I did that for a while. Like you saw, I disappeared off of Facebook for about 6 months. But now I'm back, and I've actually never blocked or unfriended anyone. I actually intentionally want to hear what people are saying, regardless of how much I disagree or am upset by it. And then when it gets to be too much, it's just time to take a break from it. It's just, and that's the only thing I can control, whether or not I plug in or not. And yes, they can make it harder for me to remove myself from it with their like buttons and everything, but I'm aware of that, and it's still up to me to, have the discipline and that kind of thing. So,
I'd like to present something that I brought up at the end of our last half hour, and that is this report. There's a man that wrote a book about how the social media monoliths are actually tweaking the population in different ways, and this is so much further than just the whole idea of getting you into a state where you will buy. It has to do with how you will conduct your life and how you will cement, inside of your own way of thinking, things that disappear in terms of they're no longer a choice for you. They're now part of your hardwired identity. And it's to a point, according to this man, that over the period of time when Barack Obama discovered that Twitter allowed him to connect with millions of young people in a powerful way and give them suggestions for their activities, that it went further than that. And then now all of a sudden, if you want to see some portion of a large population do something, you give a mess of people a suggestion and then see what happens and see who responds. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I don't know if anybody else has put any time into studying this whole phenomenon of social media and the number of hours that people spend on their phones, their iPads, and their computers engaged not only in social media, but doing searches on Google. And the searches on Google will give you a narrow set of answers for almost any question that you ask, not only depending on who you are, but depending on what they want to promote. So we're at a point where this has been kind of eased into, where they're raising the temperature of the frog in the in the pot 1 degree at a time, to the point where the frog's in the pot saying, I don't believe that's really happening. And what if it is happening? Vanessa, I haven't heard your voice in a little while, and I would really like to hear your thoughts.
Oh boy. Well, I have so many. But so that last point, I agree with what you were saying. I love that. I've heard that analogy many times, Bill, about the frog in the frying pan. And I don't know if it was actually done in practice, but I think it was a university that in the 1800s, I believe, that did this study, or maybe it really was done in practice, but the frog was put into a pan of lukewarm water, and he hung out there for a little while, as amphibians do, and then the temperature was turned up just 1 degree at a time, right? And then before long, the little guy ended up, or maybe it was a female amphibian, I don't know, but ended up being quite comfortable in this water and adjusting and adjusting and adjusting, and then before too long, it ended up frying to death. So I've heard that analogy a number of times, but you sharing it with what's going on right now was pretty cool. And there's this, I find no coincidence that we have, I know some people don't believe in it, but global warming going on right now too. So our Earth is, being raised a degree or so every year.
Mm-hmm.
And our internal temperatures are being raised a degree or so every year. What are we heading towards?
So I want to interject a thought, if you don't mind, Vanessa.
Go for it.
What if, while they were heating the water up, at a certain point they took the frog out of the pot and the warm water, and the damn frog jumped back in again?
Well,
how is
that? I don't know specifically if that did happen, but it could have happened because the frog just wanted to be where it the comfortable environment that it was brought to, even if it was eventually going to kill it. That's your point, right?
And they had the frog never has any idea that there's forces working against it,
I actually researched that, the frog in a pot thing, because I use that as a metaphor in stress management a lot, and how, we just slowly learn to live with, more and more sugar in our system, or more and more stress in our lives. And so I was curious if it was actually true, because it's a great metaphor. And as best I could find out, the frog will jump out of the pot before it boils itself. It takes a little longer for it to recognize when the heat has become a risk, if it's increased gradually, but it will get out beforehand. Furthermore, if you drop a frog into a boiling pot of water, you kill it. So it doesn't jump back out; it dies. So
can you identify the source of this?
I don't remember.
Was it by any chance?
This was it was a few years ago, and I'd used it a lot in leadership programming that I was doing, and I just always like to question everything and at least know, and still use the metaphor, but I just wanted to know some of the truth behind it. So I did kind of a deep dive through a lot of like scientific journals, just trying to find out because there's where the story came from, and then there was the actual, if there was any real research. So, and that was the best I was able to find. And I can't source any of that. You can go look for yourself, but it was quite interesting.
Personally, I've always believed it's like, the frog in the blender. Which do you want to be, the frog or the blender, right? I don't know that any human being, if they did, I don't even want to think about it. But the whole idea here is that if we look at what's human nature, people are almost never motivated to do something when things seem to at least be all right.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be bad in order for someone to take sufficient activity, and it's typically too late.
Yeah.
You get run over by circumstances if you're not focusing your attention on, the pursuit of excellence and, being happy all the time and having these thoughts that you're generating that create this way forward in a life for other people. More often than not, we get kind of sucked into, well, I know I don't agree with this, and I know it's not all right with me that it seems to be going on, but at the same point, it doesn't affect me. So we'll kind of like move on and maybe it'll go away, sort of thing. And I think that's just what they want us to think, whoever they are, those guys.
Yeah.
So Vanessa, did you have anything else? I had to interject that posed that question. What if the frog jumped out and jumped back in?
I'm glad you did. So yes, I see we're getting close to the hour now, but I wanted to ask you, what was the name of that book that you were talking about earlier? What is the title of that? It's Radicals or something?
Rules for Radicals. It's a very
right, and
famous manifesto.
And that was written in the 1860s, is that correct?
1960s.
Oh.
What you'll find is that there's it's the to-do list for all of the radical groups, the SDS, the Black Panthers, all of the groups that stopped following Martin Luther King and started believing in Malcolm X, that the only way to overthrow a government is to do it by force. And what he basically said, his name's not coming to my mind right now, but he's a very famous human being, actually who's been very friendly with a lot of people in powerful positions. But what he basically said was, you don't do that. Go blend in. Do it the way the communists do it. You don't go talking to people about how great communism is. You just get enough people who believe the same things quietly until they have a sufficient amount of voice, in a particular organization to transform it from within. And so that's really what that is. I will send you the name of the author afterwards. It's just escaping my mind at the moment. I'm having a senior moment.
No, that's fine. That's great. That's great. And then my other thought was, because you mentioned about, but we didn't really sit on it too long, but you mentioned about is disengaging a strategy. And what got me thinking about that was, you also mentioned in the 1860s that there was
what I was talking about was the Civil War.
There was a division in our country. We haven't had as much, which I love how history always repeats itself, but we haven't had as much division in our country as we did since the 1860s. And you mentioned that time in history. So that makes me want to go and just do some research on that time. And to me, it just blasts out any idea that social media has caused so much unrest. I mean, we've had conversations where, yes, we agree that it has, and it's using today's technology to do possibly what they did back in the 1860s, because, well, it's the old quote, united we stand, divided we fall.
Yes. And
so I think that I very boldly state that our technology is, especially tools such as social media, there's no doubt it's being used to create a division in our country.
Yes.
And that is so that well, a big overarching idea is that so that we're going to be so craving peace. We're all looking for peace. And we're all just going to be so worn out from fighting each other if we don't just kill each other because we're fighting amongst each other.
Yes.
So I think that's the big picture here. United we stand, divided we fall. And the best thing that can happen right now is for us to just continue to get more and more and more divided, and for this giant chasm to be, created right in the center, where we're just all going to be, on our individual sidelines and just so worn out that we're just going to take anything as it comes. And most likely that thing will be disguised as the object of peace to give us what we all want so desperately. So.
I think that's brilliant. The only thought that I have coming back on all of that is, again, the question of how do we go big with this? How do we attract the kinds of people who are happy, are complete human beings, have a contribution to make, to the rest of the world and society, if not just in their families or their communities? How do we, in the face of a set of conversations at the moment, and believe you me, it's not accidental what we see on TV every day. It's not accidental, because when we're talking about whatever they're giving us to talk about, we're not talking about something else. With that said, there's something else that many people are not talking about at the moment. And since we are at the top of our half hour, I'd like to pose this question. What's it going to take to have the conversation shift to a world that works?
I have a counter question.
Sure.
What if that conversation is already happening and it's just going to take a little bit of time for it to evolve?
We actually know that it is happening. It's happening right here.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe all we're really doing is, I kind of like the multi-generational approach, and we're just planting a shade tree under which we may never sit, So, and who knows which one of these seeds are the one that's going to take root. So it's having a little faith that you can have a positive impact that goes beyond your lifetime, and maybe it doesn't even manifest in your lifetime. I'm willing to believe in that personally. All I can do is my part, and then it'll grow at the speed that it grows, and you can't stand there and scream at the ground, grow. It doesn't work. You intend it though.
Amen, brother. I'm more than willing to have every bit of my memory erased and the conversation go on in other people's minds and lips and hearts.
Yeah. Yep.
That said, I think this would be a good time for us to call it a day and thank our viewers once again for listening in. And if you have any comments or some things that you want to ask us after the fact, please put the comments below. And so we'll go ahead one at a time and sign off, starting with Vanessa.
All right. Once again, I've enjoyed this conversation with everyone, and I look forward to asking more questions the next time we all seek to get some answers. Thanks for being with us today.
Excellent. Tina?
Yes, thank you, everybody. This has been a great, stimulating conversation, healthy, and I really thank the viewers, because we all need to have those healthy conversations with each other.
Excellent. Mr. Ken?
Thanks, and do the best you can to keep smiling.
Yep.
Lisa?
Can I take a little time for a poem that was read in 2008?
I wish you would.
Hey, please.
Hope and Owner's Manual. Look, you might as well know this thing is going to take endless repair. Rubber bands, crazy glue, tapioca, the square of the hypotenuse, 19th century novels, heartstrings, sunrise, all these are useful. Also feathers. To keep it humming, sometimes you have to stand on an incline where everything looks possible, on the line you drew yourself, or in the grocery line making faces at a toddler secretly over his mother's shoulder. You might have to pop the clutch and run past all the evidence. past everyone who is laughing or praying for you. Definitely you don't want to go directly to jail, but still, here you go, passing time, passing strange. Don't pass this off. In the worst of times, you will have to pass it off, park it, and fly by the seat of your pants. With nothing in the bank, you'll still want to take the express. Tiptoe past the dogs of the apocalypse that are sleeping in the shade of your future. Pay at the window. Pass your hope like a bad check. You might still have enough time to make a deposit.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that one.
Very nice.
I got nothing to add. So bye-bye, y'all. We'll see.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for playing.
Thanks for playing.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.